The best advice anyone ever gave me was 2 words. You can't. And you know what my response was? 2 words. Watch me.
Welcome to the Team Crosson podcast. We're Phil and Danielle Crosson, a father and daughter team serving in law enforcement and competing as amateur bodybuilders. Everything we share comes from real life, early mornings in the gym, long days in uniform, and a commitment to discipline, service, and constant growth. This podcast is about building strength physically, mentally, and professionally. Each week we talk accountability, resilience, fitness, mental health, leadership, and the mindset it takes to raise your standards in every area of life. Whether you're in uniform, under the bar, or leading at home or at work, you're in the right place. So let's get started.
Welcome back to the Team Crosson podcast, where we discuss fitness, mindset, discipline, and achieving your goals regardless of age. I'm Phil Crosson.
And I'm Danielle Crosson.
Today's episode is going to be geared towards current police officers, future police officers preparing for the academy, and really anyone interested in tactical fitness. We're going to discuss how to properly prepare for the police academy, and more importantly, how to maintain your fitness throughout your law enforcement career up to and including retirement.
A lot of recruits focus solely on passing the academy, but the real challenge is staying physically and mentally capable for the next 20 to 30 years.
So in the first part, we discussed some of this with Rich Fitter when we had him on the show last, and we're going to talk a little bit about training for the police academy. I know we've touched on this in the past, but we've also gotten some emails and some questions about it. So we just want to go a little more back into that topic and talk a little bit about what most recruits get wrong. One of the biggest mistakes that prospective recruits make is training like bodybuilders instead of tactical athletes, and we really touched on that with Rich. Many will spend a lot of hours in the gym doing chest and arm exercises, but they really neglect things like running, work capacity, mobility, and overall conditioning. And actually, I've even had friends whose kids are applying to academies and have failed the entrance test, and they've told me themselves that they failed because they didn't focus on those types of things.
Well, right. I mean, the academy doesn't really care how much you can bench press or leg press or, military press or any of that. It's, your running, your endurance, being able to recover under stress, and a lot more of the body weight workouts as opposed to all these heavyweight lifting routines.
And it's interesting you mentioned stress, because one of the biggest things they do in the academy, as you know, is they try to put you under a great deal of stress, because stress on top of anything you're doing changes the entire dynamic. And a lot of times in policing, you're going to be under stress trying to make decisions, trying to do tactical operations, hopefully you're never faced with it, but possibly even trying to operate, a taser or a firearm or something, and make those critical life or death decisions under stress. So that's a key component.
Absolutely.
But if I were preparing someone for the academy today, I just want to touch on some of the things I would focus on or suggest that they focus on, and I'm sure you'll be able to back this up, having gone through much more recently than me. But cardiovascular endurance, that's probably, I would think, one of the biggest, right?
The top thing. I mean, no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing your long run day or you're doing your, calisthenics, or you're doing, just daily tasks that you're running back and forth between the classroom, you have to be able to perform and recover within minutes. You're not getting rest periods where you're at the gym, checking your phone, talking to somebody. You're getting maybe 60 to 90 seconds, and then you're on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to hold off a little bit about the cardio endurance and some of what it does with the body and the mind and the importance of it, because I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. But really, it is critical and it's key. Another one would be functional strength. I mean, we talked about this at length with Rich. To your point, it's not about bench press or pull-ups. That's all part of functional strength to make you, more stable and more capable. But it's focusing on the strength that's going to get you through the job, the things you're going to need to do in the function and performance of your duties. Core stability is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, you really want to focus, if you're going into the academy, on what is required from your academy. I can really only speak for the New Jersey academies. I mean, they're all pretty standard. Other states may have different requirements, but it's usually the components of push-ups, sit-ups, running. There is a sprint, jumping, and then, as you get into the academy, you have more of those obstacle courses, defensive tactics, all incorporated within your PT as well.
And just let's take a quick look at some of the things you mentioned here, because I created the list and I just want to look through and talk through as we go. Some of the other things to build the endurance and create stress on the body that I recall were like mountain climbers, squat thrusts, things you would not normally put your body through on a regular basis, things that, regular workouts in the gym. When I say regular workouts, I'm really referring to strength training, more weightlifting. But those types of workouts are not going to help you with these types of exercises. And I know that firsthand because, unfortunately for me, I did exactly that. Before I went in the academy, I just focused on my strength. I didn't focus on endurance. I didn't focus on running. I didn't focus on, core stability and being able to do these exercises. And then when they get you in there and they call you up in front of a class of 20, 30, 50, 100 recruits, and you have to call out the exercises in a 4 count while you're doing them. And if you don't have the endurance, you get through about a third of them and you're out of gas.
Or if, you're leading them just fine, but there's someone in the class that isn't doing it just right and they say start over, and you had enough endurance to get through, the 4 counts of 10, and now you're doing it for 20 or 30 or 40, and you need to be able to project your voice, because if they can't hear you, it's not loud enough, start over. It's putting that stress on your body, but you still have to perform.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times 10 or 20 count of an exercise, because usually when in the beginning days of the academy, they'll start you out with 10 or 15. Everything's like 10 or 15. They'll work it to 20, 30, 60, 80, whatever it is. But that simple 10, the first week or two, can turn into 80 real quickly as people are not keeping up. And they do that on purpose. It creates some of that mental game. It creates some of that stress to challenge you and see if you're going to quit, because if you're going to quit there, then you don't belong in policing.
Right.
And that's part of the testing itself. But I think equally as critical when we're talking about these things is mobility. I didn't focus on mobility before the academy. And when you start doing those types of exercises, mountain climbers, squat thrusts, some of the obstacle courses, moving your body in different positions than you're normally doing during a regular regimented exercise program really does a lot to your body and takes a lot out of you if you're not prepared for it. So really a lot of key here would be to focus on body weight movements, reviewing for your particular academy, whether it's fire, police, whatever state you're in, and find out what those exercises are, and then do body weight movements. And you can add strength training and everything else in, but to get your body to move and get comfortable and used to those positions.
I mean, and the one thing that most people overlook is the recovery aspect.
100%.
You hear people all the time, I go to the academy in a few months, I'm going to start my training, I'm going to get really good. And they're training 7 days a week and not recovering, and they burn themselves out before they even make it through the front doors of the academy.
Or, as we know, more common even than burning out, which is common, is injury.
Well, that too.
When you're overworking certain body components and body parts, you're gonna sooner or later, they just wear out. I mean, it's just the potential for injury gets greater and greater. But let's talk, Danielle. I just threw some ideas down here, and I don't know that you agree or disagree, so let's talk through them for maybe a recommended weekly training discussion if someone were going to academy.
I mean, I see kind of what you have here, and I agree, but I also disagree. I think...
Very basic, just conversation points.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, you don't want to give up your strength training completely.
No.
So adding maybe 1 or 2 days within the week of strength training isn't a bad idea, because I know in my academy we did also do some strength training.
Hold on, before you go call me out on the list, I did have it there on Wednesday.
I know.
All right.
I see it.
Just making sure.
And I see strength training on Monday. That's why I say keep that in there.
Okay.
I'm looking.
All right. Thought you might have overlooked it.
But my biggest advice would be, if you know somebody who's gone through the academy that you're going through, have them walk you through a week.
Yeah.
Because, we went to 2 separate academies. And I've talked to many people now that have gone through separate academies, And I know for ours, the way our split was set up was very different. We didn't PT every day. We didn't have PT sessions daily.
We did.
We did do PT throughout the week, but when I went through, we had a different DT standard. So we needed more hours than what happened when you went through. So we had to dedicate 2 full days of the morning to DT in order to reach our hours.
And DT is?
Defensive tactics. I apologize. I thought we went over that, but maybe we didn't.
Just a reminder.
So for us, it was, usually like a short run and then a lot of calisthenics on Monday. Wednesday, we would either do like some type of like sprinting mixed with strength training. They'd pull out like the medicine balls, they'd pull out dumbbells, they'd pull out all sorts of different things. We'd be doing bear crawls, crab walks, things like that.
Yeah, duck walks.
And then on Friday was our long run. So I was not a runner. I still would not consider myself a runner. If you can do about 3 miles comfortably going into the academy, you'll be set because it'll slowly increase. You'll start less than that. So by the time you get to that 3-mile mark, your endurance will be built. And then, you'll be good for the remainder. I mean, at the end of our academy, we were running 8 to 10 miles. I think the longest run we did was like 9.5, maybe 10. But if you can do 3 comfortably, you'll build that endurance throughout it. So that's kind of like a good goal to set for yourself.
And keep in mind for most academies, I know yours, mine, when we talk about running, you're not running that, 3, 5, 8, 10 miles on a track on a flat level surface. You're going to be running that in all different conditions. We were running in parking lots, roadways, through the woods in some cases.
Beaches.
For you, beaches, right? And it's important to keep that in mind when you're doing your training, because that's also part of being a police officer. When you have to run or maybe chase a subject on foot, in the performance of your duties, it's not going to be on a track. You have to be prepared for all of those things, uneven surfaces, running in the night with low light opportunities.
I was just going to say, when I hear people training or, preparing and they're like, oh, I didn't run this morning because it was a downpour. And I said, well, we ran in the downpours.
Right.
I remember there was a day that we ran in the snow. And something else to consider is you're a team when you're in this. So if one person doesn't have their hat, you're not wearing your hats. So you may be running in 20-degree weather or less with no hat on, no gloves,
And again, we're going to touch on this a little bit more, but I think you're hitting on, again, these are all components that elevate the stress level to force you to do all of these different things while under stress and learn how to deal and adjust to the process.
But just kind of bringing it back to the, weekly training, discussion, you may want to set up your week to have calisthenics in kind of almost every day, because in the academy you're doing them every day.
Yeah,
if
definitely.
you get in trouble for something, you're getting on the ground and you're either doing push-ups or doing mountain climbers or doing leg lifts or planks or a multitude of different things. So incorporating them with the proper count.
And you are getting in trouble for something, because a lot of times they'll find stuff you didn't even know you did, and you may not have done it, but they're going to find it to just create reasons to generate more opportunities to put you through the exercises and the stress levels.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like it's hard to give an example of the 4 count we're talking about without visualizing it, and while we're sitting, I can't really do it. But if you were to do jumping jacks, let's say, as your arms come up, that's 1, down, 2, up, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2. So that's how you should be training as you're doing them until you get to 10.
That's right, because it really is more than the number they're giving you. The same thing, while you were doing that, I just kept, man, those mountain climbers and squat thrusts were just killer. And I can still feel like I'm, envisioning doing them today. But to your point, as you're kicking the legs back behind you, it's, 1, 2, 3, 1. So it's not one time back, and that's 1 repetition. So it's almost the equivalent of 4 repetitions per 1 count.
Right, and I think that's where a lot of people make the mistake of they're going 1, 2, 3, 4 until they get to 10. And then when they get to the academy, they're like, wait a minute. So knowing that that count is there to prepare yourself. So when you get in the academy and that first day they call you up there and say, you know, okay, Crosson, mountain climbers, go.
Right.
You know the count, you're prepared. And if you have the resources to talk to somebody that's done it even more recent than I have, do it, because things change all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're doing these exercises, practice it that way. You know, if you're getting ready for the academy, practice doing the exercises with the 4 count, counting them out loud, because I assure you at some point you'll be standing up in front of that group, maybe for more than one exercise as the class leader through that exercise. And not only do you have to do it, but you have to shout it out, and which is going to take even more out of you and really test your endurance.
So if you're not a loud person, you got to start practicing being loud, because they don't like those little mousy, squirrely voices. They want to hear you. Because if you're out on the street and you're talking to someone and they're far away, or there's a crowd of people, they need to be able to hear you.
Yeah, we'll talk. I have some more things on that later that I want to hit on, so that was a good opening there. But let's talk a little bit. You know, you were talking about the week and the exercises, and I'm looking at, let's say, Saturday and Sunday, where we have recovery and active recovery. Why don't we talk a little bit about that importance?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the academy, you're going 5 days a week. So if you're preparing for it, keeping Saturday and Sunday as that recovery, you know, is a good thing. You know, I believe in rest days. Even with bodybuilding, we talk about our rest days. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you want to make Saturday your recovery day. And,
part of the process. You
know, you're doing your stretching and you're, you know, hydrating and eating right. And that's your Saturday. And then Sunday for an active recovery, I mean, whether you want to go take a walk.
Maybe a light treadmill.
Yeah.
Just
get on a bike.
Moving your body, getting ready for the, you know, the exercise portion again Monday morning. But, you know, very, very, you know, light passive exercise.
Yeah, it could be like a 20-minute walk on the treadmill or elliptical, you know, slow paced. You're not trying to run a marathon in that 20 minutes. You know, just getting your body moving so that the next morning when you get up, you're not sore or tired, or, you know, your body's refreshed and ready to go.
So in the next segment, I wanted to talk a little bit about the athlete versus the tactical athlete.
Rich and I just had a probably 40-minute conversation about this maybe 3 days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he called me and we were talking about some of the things that he's up to, and, you know, him talking about me being a tactical athlete and what that means. And I mean, this is perfect that we're talking about this right now.
And really, we both fill both of these roles right now.
We do.
And we have to balance those two areas. And let's talk it through. So basically, a police officer isn't a bodybuilder. We know that. But
right.
A bodybuilder can be a police officer.
Correct.
And a police officer is a tactical athlete.
And I think that's where it's a term that until Rich really used it, I never thought about, and it's not one that's common that you hear about ever, really.
I agree.
And, you know, the first thing that comes to my mind, and the best way to explain it as a tactical athlete, is doing exercises that will help you in the profession. That is, like, I think the best way to understand tactical athlete. You have to be tactically sound to do your job, and you have to have a level of athleticism. And one of the exercises Rich had me do up to the academy, after the academy, you know, I'm sure he'll find a way to incorporate it into my program at some point, was the bag drags.
Yeah. Yep.
We had a sandbag, and you'd have to grab it and drag it. And I remember one day I said to him, Rich, what is the point of this? And this was also while I was going through my, you know, knee rehabilitation. And he said, you want to be a police officer, don't you? I said, yes, I do. He said, okay, you ever going to have to grab your partner by the vest if they're shot, pass out, get hurt, something else? And I said, yeah. He goes, they might be bigger and heavier than you, right? So grab that bag and drag it. And those are those tactical exercises that are not only helping you build muscle and strengthen yourself, but they're useful in your job.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting you talk about that, because one of the things we used to focus on when I was on our tactical team, we used to do our monthly training, and one of the instructors was really big on that exact drill, getting a downed officer out of a situation. So a lot of our tactical vests had a handle on the back.
Yep.
And one of the exercises we would perform during the training is we would always have officer down drills, and we would have to extract those officers. And to your point, we would always try to mix it up so that most times the smallest officer was trying to drag the largest officer out of there, because you just never know what you're going to be exposed to and what you're going to have to perform. So it makes sense to learn the techniques and what muscle groups to use and how to properly lift and pull to get someone out of one of those situations. And again, this all relates back to the stress that they put on you in the academy, because you're going to be under stress. You're going to see a fellow officer either injured, hurt, or down, God forbid, shot. And you're going to have to deal with those stresses while remembering how to move and function yourself and protect yourself getting out of those situations. And it all comes down to muscle memory.
Yeah.
So if you're training properly and continue to train properly throughout your career as a tactical athlete and police officer, that will come back in those times that your body needs to, recall that without even thinking about it.
Well, and that's the thing, and the academy is building you for the career, and it's giving you those tools in a controlled stress. So when the stress isn't controlled, you're able to handle it and kind of think back to that muscle memory, like you're saying. The sprinting, the climbing, the getting over the wall during the obstacle course section. You could be running after a suspect, and all of a sudden there's this big fence, and they hop it. You gotta hop it. If there's no door and there's no time to get through that gate, you got to go over it. You can't just say, oh, well, there he goes.
Yeah, somebody else will get him.
Yeah, I mean, these are all things that when you're in the academy, because I was there, what do I need this for? What do I need that for? Just like math in school, I used to say that all the time.
Right. When am I going to use calculus and algebra again?
And, I mean, in this profession, you could need it, unfortunately for me, because I didn't like math. But, you got to also think, while you're doing all of this, you're wearing a vest. That is not light.
No, and when you throw on the amount of gear that we carry nowadays, to your point, you throw on the ballistic vest, you throw on the radio, you throw on the gun belt, you throw on the extra ammunition, you throw on the handcuffs, you throw on the body cam, you throw on the taser, you throw on the nightstick. I mean, you could just go on and on. You're potentially looking at, 30 plus pounds of gear on top of your body weight. And that's a lot of extra stress on the body that you need to be accounting for.
Right. And, that's part of it. So now not only are you under stress and you're, running after someone and you're doing all of these obstacles, you have all of this extra gear that's in the way that you're not used to.
Right. Standing out from your body can catch on things, happens all the time. I mean, even getting out of the police car sometimes in a hurry is something you have to think through and practice, because the seatbelt gets caught on, whatever's hanging off your vest, your camera, your radio, your badge, all kinds of things. So,
and just looking at one of your other points here, not only are you carrying all of this stuff, you might be under stress, it may be the last hour of your shift and you're dead tired and you're ready to go home because you worked in overtime the day before, you were held late after your last shift, you just finished almost your 12-hour shift, and all of a sudden there's, a bank robbery and a suspect is fleeing. You never know what it's going to bring. So whether it's the beginning of your shift or the end of your shift, you have to be tactically sound and confident in your athletic abilities to know that you can do what you need to do.
It's interesting. You were talking about the list I made here, and I had some notes here that, things your job may require. And it was obviously carrying equipment, sprinting, climbing, wrestling, dragging a victim, working a 12-hour shift, and then at the end of the list, I have here, sometimes all this happens within a single shift. I've actually had those days in my career that every one of these things happened, and sometimes simultaneously, to your point. You get that bank fraud or that, that attempted robbery or something that goes down. And next thing you know, you're carrying all your gear, you get down there, the person takes off, you're sprinting after them, they jump over something, you got to jump over something, you got to, catch this person finally. Sometimes you're wrestling them to the ground, and a lot of times they're still uncooperative, and you're trying to drag them to their feet to get them into the patrol car. So all this can happen, as you said, within minutes, unexpectedly. And again, to add to where you were going with it at the end of a shift, it could be end of a midnight tour where you're completely exhausted, you've been up all night, which goes against the body's natural,
no matter how many times you do it.
Yeah, you just these are things that you just have to be prepared for as a tactical athlete.
Well, and to kind of wrap up this whole little section of our conversation, you can ask the question, what's more important for an officer? A 300-pound bench press or the ability to run up 3 flights of stairs and still make good decisions and maintain situational awareness while you're going up those stairs?
And, just from spending, more than 3 decades now in law enforcement, as time goes on and you see a lot of officers get older, I mean, you drive around and you see how many cops are really out of shape. You start to see that these things become more and more important, especially as you age. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit now going into the next segment here, is staying fit, post-academy and going into the, later parts of your career.
Rich said it best to me when we were talking about the whole idea of bodybuilding after the academy. And, there were pros and cons to that as well. But his first thing he said to me is, you're about to be in the best shape of your life.
Yep.
Coming out of this academy, working out consistently for 20 weeks, 5 days a week, let's keep going. And that's the thing, you're coming out of this in the best shape of your life. And unless you're, not being paid by a department, you're being paid to work out is really what it is.
Yeah, get in the best shape of your life and they're paying you.
Yeah, you're getting paid to be really involved in your fitness. And I woke up every day very thankful for that. But, you hear everybody come out of the academy, I'm going to keep running. I'm going to be doing these push-ups. I'm going to keep in shape. Now, some departments do require you to maintain your fitness, and they do fitness testing, and some don't. And if you look at a lot of people that have finished the academy and you see them out on the street, it's evident not everybody keeps up with their fitness.
Right, no doubt. And then, you come out in the best shape of your life, and we get it. We've been there, and well, I've been there, you'll be there. Then life happens.
I've been there.
Shift work, overtime, family responsibilities, court appearances, the list goes on and on. And then fitness, unfortunately, in a lot of cases becomes optional. It often gets pushed to the bottom of the list. You need to get some sleep, you have some family obligations, there's only so many hours in a day, and that's when you start to see going into that, end of the first third, middle of the career, where officers start to get themselves really out of shape.
Yeah, it does really become optional to some people because of everything going on. And, you've been there a lot more than I have, but I've been there where I was in school while I was, working, and I had overtimes, I had on-calls, I've had things go on. I've had, times where I've been held over a little later than I planned.
Right.
And you don't get there, but, when you're dedicated enough and, determined, you make it into your schedule. But it really should be essential equipment, just as essential as any of the other piece of equipment that's on your body.
Absolutely. Again, just to drive some points home, I made some notes here I didn't want to forget. And as you say, your fitness should be an essential part of your equipment. You wouldn't leave your firearm at home, right?
Nope.
You shouldn't neglect your health either, because without your health and fitness, you're not able to operate optimally, and especially when you throw on, stress and challenges like that. And I think it's important to know that your fitness in this particular career not only can save your life, but will probably be responsible for saving somebody else's life along the way. And that's an awesome responsibility. And I think a lot of officers forget that you took an oath to do this job, and part of this job is the fitness component. So again, we have to train with our firearms, we have to train in defensive tactics, we have to train in case law, and there are things we're required to do. Unfortunately, at this point, for most agencies, fitness is not a requirement. And honestly, in this career, it probably should be, because it can be the difference between life or death.
And that's why I'm seeing more and more police departments allowing within their shift, for officers to go and work out.
Yes.
They give them that workout break, that
Starting to
fitness
become
break.
more common.
And that's important because when you're working a 12-hour shift, as most, police departments really do, you don't have a lot of time to go work out. You have family, you have other things, and we're all human. We all understand that. And I think more agencies are starting to become aware of that and seeing that if they provide that little bit of time for officers to go and work out, it's good for their mental health, it's good for them physically, and it's better for the department.
You know, and the sad part of that is for the towns that don't allow it, sometimes the reason I've heard, I know one of the police departments that I had worked in, you know, when that topic came up and was broached to the, you know, the town officials to be able to do that or get the equipment and have the ability to, you know, do some training on duty, the first thing that they look to is liability. Well, you know, an officer could get hurt and then, you know, that becomes a work-related injury and then we lose that officer. But that's very short-sighted because the likelihood is in our job, without being in shape, without having that opportunity to train, we're likely to get hurt.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not strengthening your muscles, you know, and all of, not just the main muscles, but all those supportive muscles around, you could blow a knee out while you're running after somebody.
Happens all the time.
You can blow an ankle out, you know, You
were talking about jumping over that fence earlier. I have seen guys I've worked with jump over a fence and land the wrong way on the other side and put a knee or an ankle out. Personally, I've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that's necessary, and, you know, though places are saying it's a liability, I mean, it's more of a liability to send your officer out there unprepared.
Absolutely.
And putting not only now that officer in danger, but their partner.
Community.
Anybody that's in the vicinity, you know, they shouldn't be on the street if they can't perform physically the way they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, I would say here, 3 non-negotiables should be strength training 2 to 4 times a week, performing cardiovascular work throughout the week, and maintaining a healthy body weight. I think those are absolute non-negotiables, especially as I've gone through my career that I've learned. And I've had some challenges keeping up with that. But as I got later in my career now, especially, you know, at my age, being 58 years old, you realize the importance of keeping yourself fit for what you might have to do at a moment's notice. And I look at the guys and girls I'm working with, and, you know, I have to take some responsibility for them as well. And that's just something I think about. So now let's shift a little further ahead and talk about tactical fitness with over 20 plus years on the job. And this is where Rich touched on a lot about like longevity.
Yeah.
You know, the goal isn't just to be fit at 25, it's to be capable at 35, 45, 55, you know, whatever it is, and to avoid some of those common injuries that we see in law enforcement. You want to touch on a few of those?
Well, I mean, I see the first one being lower back injuries. I mean, you got to remember, you're also going to have wear and tear from just a matter of having your gun belt on and your vest.
Pulling down all night.
You know, your posture isn't going to be pristine because you have all this weight on your upper body. You know, I've even noticed it, and I haven't even been on the job as long as you have, of, you know, hip and like back issues from that gun pulling down on your hip.
And what people don't realize is the equipment on there's more and more equipment added all the time, and it starts, especially if you have a narrower waist, you wind up having to put equipment all the way around that belt. And when you're sitting in a car or a truck or an SUV, you know, for 12-hour shifts with handcuffs or, you know, a flashlight or something in the back of the gun belt pressing against your back and the seat all night long, that really becomes uncomfortable. And
it does.
Creates problems.
You know, and then things like shoulder injuries, knee injuries, even sleep deprivation, you know, is a common issue. And most of that can be avoided if you're doing the work outside of the job to keep yourself healthy and strong.
Yeah, prevention.
You know, you could prevent all those injuries, you know.
Or minimize it.
Minimize
them.
Yeah. You know, injuries happen, things happen, but the stronger you are, even if you do have the injury, the recovery will be less extensive.
Yeah, it'll be much easier to recover. And, you know, that was part of when I had my shoulder injury or shoulder replacement, which we were prepared for, different from your knee injury, which happened in a split second. One of the things Rich focused on was strength training certain muscles around the shoulder joint. And in the recovery, even the doctor said he was impressed how quickly and strong we recovered. And that had to do with the preparation ahead of time. And that's what we're talking about here. This is all about being prepared throughout your career and into retirement. So, you know, we touched on strength training, proper recovery, mobility work. Let's talk a little bit about nutrition.
I mean, shift work can be hard. You're working, you know, either all day or all night, or maybe half of the day into the night. Things aren't always open in the evenings. You know, for me, I'm a huge advocate of meal prepping. if you have your meals prepped and you do the work on your rest day, whether that be your Saturday or your Sunday, you're set for the week and you set yourself up for success. You don't have to worry about trying to find a spot to grab a breakfast sandwich or a bagel. You have your, whatever it is you like to eat in the morning, your eggs, your overnight oats, you have a lot going on. So having those meals readily available also helps when you're jumping from call to call to call or scene to scene or whatever it is. You have those snacks that you can quick pop in your mouth as you're going, and you're not, kind of panicking on what to eat and end up in the McDonald's drive-thru, because that's going to kind of take back all that progress you made in the gym when you're working outside of your shift.
Seeing a theme here, and the theme seems to be preparation. Whether it's preparing for the academy, keeping prepared while you're in your career, preparing to go into retirement, preparing your nutrition throughout. Everything seems to boil back to preparation, right?
Yeah.
And I think another thing that we need to look at that really is impactful is regular medical screenings. It's important to understand where your body's at, what's going on with your body. I was very fortunate in my career, and I know you have followed suit there, where we got involved with Dr. Romano at Madison Medical and Sports Rehabilitation on Main Street in Madison, New Jersey. And he has been such a resource to us in keeping us in the game. He specializes in athletes, tactical athletes, keeping police officers, firefighters, EMS, DPW employees fully functional. He's just a great resource, and everything under one roof at the facility.
The best way to describe Madison Medical is it's a one-stop shop. You can get anything and everything you need for your health there, and you're not going to 18 different places. They do it all there, and you're in and out, very, very quickly.
Just the vast areas that they cover, from chiropractic to physical therapy to orthopedics to sports medicine, all under one roof. He's really been instrumental in keeping us in the game, and he loves to work with, first responders, and he understands the challenges. So that's an important part of this as well, is keeping your physical and medical health all on track. So let's talk here real quick, Daniel, a little bit about fitness leadership.
Fitness is contagious, and that's something I think we've kind of reiterated throughout this podcast thus far.
Yep.
And, when your supervisors are prioritizing health and wellness, it creates that culture where officers are, likely to do the same. So, if you are a supervisor or you're in law enforcement and others that want to get into that, stress the importance of fitness and how it'll help you throughout your career, and, lead the next generation to be better than where we are now.
And the last, that was important to me, and as a chief was when I really started getting involved with Rich and looking at the bodybuilding, and that was one of the things that was important to me, looking good in uniform, feeling good, showing the guys that you need to aspire to a level of fitness for the job, and you do have to lead by example. And I think it's important because fitness also helps with confidence. Certainly builds your confidence. You walk into a room, people see you're fit, they're less likely to challenge you, they respect that. Certainly helps with officer safety. We've talked about stress management, probably ad nauseum. That command presence that I was just talking about gives you also that leadership credibility as you're moving up through the ranks in the police department. So it's impactful.
And it helps the public feel better when they see someone that, is in shape and fit and looks the part. They feel safer than someone that shows up that doesn't look like they fit the role of what everyone sees when they hear police officer.
And honestly, I'm sorry, this is probably going to offend a lot of people, but the reality is I can't tell you, as a police officer who's been fit through most of my career, how many people have said to me, there's nothing worse than when I'm driving down and see an out of shape police officer, dragging himself out of the car, gut hanging over the gun belt, doesn't look like he could physically manage anybody, let alone himself. That image just sends the wrong message to the community. It sends the wrong message to your department and your partners that are counting on you too.
Yeah, because your partners are looking at you at the end of the day to help them get home, just as you're looking at your partner. You help each other so you both go home safe at the end of the day.
So just something to think about. If you know or feel you're getting out of shape, pay attention to it and take the steps to help yourself help your partner, help your community. Okay, Danielle, let's move into the new segment that I kind of like so far that we've been experimenting with, the rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
Okay, most important academy exercise.
I'd say push-ups. I think that's a default that they go to no matter if you're getting in trouble or you're taking your fitness test or you're just on your face in the hallway. They're giving you push-ups most likely.
Most overlooked fitness component.
I think honestly your cardiovascular endurance. A lot of people forget about that and just think about, the testing or, lifting. So, making sure your cardiovascular endurance is there.
Biggest nutrition mistake recruits make.
I mean, I saw it in my class. They go home on the weekend and they indulge in everything they want because they ate healthy all week and figured I worked out, I earned it. And then they come back in Monday and they can't finish that run. So being consistent with your nutrition all throughout the academy.
Junk is not a reward.
All right, now it's my turn for some rapid questions.
Okay.
All right, what's your most important fitness lesson learned during your career?
I would say start young and stay consistent.
Okay, and what would you do differently at age 25?
I think if I could do over, I would go back and focus on the tactical training aspect.
What advice would you give a new recruit?
Keep the mindset and discipline they instill in you in the academy throughout your career, and you'll have a great career.
Some good advice. I'll take that as well. And what advice would you give to a veteran officer?
Wow, being one myself, really focus on your health and wellness and your physical fitness, because as a veteran officer towards the end of your career, it's going to be the most important thing to keep you alive. Mindset.
It's a good one.
Okay, well, as we close out, we just want to remind you, whether you're preparing for the academy, currently serving, or nearing retirement, remember that fitness is not about appearance, it's about readiness, and it's about being capable when somebody needs you most, including yourself.
And it's about investing in your future self. The habits you build today determine the officer you'll be 10 or 20 years from now.
Thanks for joining us on Team Crosson Podcast, and remember,
believing is achieving. And always ask yourself, why not you?
See you next episode.
See you next time.
Thank
and
you.
Don't forget, if you finish this episode, to head over to @Team Crosson Podcast on Instagram. Throughout this week, we're going to be posting some reels and shorts with some tutorials for some of those exercises for the academy. Yep. So head on over.
This way you can associate that with what we were trying to explain through the podcast.
So head over there and we'll see you next time.
Good luck. Stay safe out there.
Stay safe.